To favorite our movie or to add it to the watch list, we have to open up the code for the movie information component. Inside of our movie information component, we've already created two different functions that are going to be responsible for adding the movies to the favorites or watch listing them. These functions are going to have to be asynchronous because we're going to make an API call inside of them. Also, this is going to be the only place in our entire application where we'll be making API calls straight from our components and not using Redux. The reason for that is because Redux Toolkit Query allows us to fetch certain things only as hooks. And if we wanted to create a hook that would add the movie to the favorites, something like use add to favorites, and that would be a query, that wouldn't really work. We don't want to do it on a global component level. We want to do it inside of a function, and we're not allowed to do that. Because of that, we won't be able to implement this using Redux Toolkit. We're going to just use a basic await and then axios.post request. The route or the endpoint we want to call is going to be https api.the movie.db.org/3/account/user.id/favorite. We're also going to add some query parameters, so we can say question mark API_key is going to be equal to process.env.react_app, and then let's see how we named our key. If we go to our environment variables, that's going to be tmdb_key. So we can do that right here. And the final thing we have to add is going to be the session ID. So we can say and session_ID is equal to local storage dot get item, and that's going to be session_ID. And this is going to be our entire request. It's a really long line. I think it's the longest line we've had so far. Also, notice that we need to get the user's ID here, and we don't have the user imported yet, so we have to get it from our Redux store. And we can do that right here by using the use selector. So we can say const user is equal to use selector, and then inside of there we have to provide our user selector, which we can import user selector, and that's coming from //features auth. That's going to give us access to our user. And again, I know that this was an extremely long line. This was just the first parameter of our call. So now we can provide a second one by saying comma and then curly brace. Inside of here, we can provide some options. We need to say media_type is going to be equal to movie. We also need to say media_ID is going to be equal to ID, because TMDB needs to know which movie do we want to favorite. In the endpoint, we're only saying which account wants to favorite that movie, but we're not saying which movie to favorite, so we're doing that right here. And then in here, we need to say favorite, which is a boolean, and that could be either true or false. So are we going to add it or remove it to the favorites? Because of that, we have to have a new use state, which is going to say is movie favorited. We already have a dummy variable, but now we can create a real use state variable. That's going to be use state is movie favorited. And at the start, that's going to be set to false. We can create one last use state field. That's going to be use state is movie watch listed. Great. And that's going to be also set to false. We can now remove these two variables. And in here, if the movie is favorited, then we simply want to say not is movie favorited. That means that if it is favorited, we want to unfavorite it. But if it's not added to the favorites, then we want to add it. There was a lot of favorites here. Okay, that's enough about favorites. this is going to be it for our entire API call. And finally, we also want to say set is movie favorited, and that's going to be set where we get the previous state. And finally, we want to toggle it off. So if it has been added to the favorites, then we want to toggle it off. And we can basically copy this entire request and paste it for the watch list. Everything is going to be the same. Besides here, we're simply going to say watch list. Literally everything else remains the same. Just in here, we have to say is movie watchlisted. And we also have to change this, set is movie watchlisted. Great. So what's really happening here is we're making API calls to our TMDB account. That way, we're going to either add it to our favorites of our account or add it to our watch list, and then we'll be able to retrieve them. So now we came to that second step. How are we going to know which movies did we add to favorites? For that, we're going to go to our TMDB services. Inside of here, we're going to create, I think, our last endpoint. And we can put it right here at the top. That's going to be get list. I'm putting it as list because this is going to serve us for getting favorites as well as the watch list movies. So we can say builder.query. Again, the same thing. We have a query, and in here, now we're going to accept a few more things in the parameters. It's going to be an object that's going to get access to the list name. We need an account ID. We also need a session ID. And finally, we need a page. Once we have all of that information, we can simply go to /account/account ID /list name $API underscore key is equal to TMDB API key. And we also have to pass a session ID. So we can say and session underscore ID is equal to session ID. And one more thing, page is equal to page. This again was the longest endpoint we've made so far. We have to add a comma here. Now let's export this action creator right here. That's going to be use get list query. And we can go into our movie information. And right before we get the recommendations, we can get our lists, which is going to be our favorite movies and our watch list movies. We can pull this get movie query here so that we have all of our hooks in one spot. I'm going to say const data as favorite movies, and that's going to be equal to use get list query. Of course, we have to import it at the top, so let's do that right here. And inside of that, we have to pass an object with a lot of things. We have to pass our list name. So right here, let's say list name is equal to a string that's going to be favorite /movies. Then we have to pass the account ID, which is going to be equal to user.id. We also have to provide a session ID, which is going to be equal to local storage dot get item session underscore ID. And one final thing is going to be the page, which we're going to set to 1. Now we can basically duplicate this line. The only thing we're going to change is from favorite movies to watch list movies. And then finally, the list name is going to say watch list movies. Everything else is going to remain the same. And that's how we get access to favorite movies and also watch list movies. Now, if you think about it, we don't need to use our favorite or watch list movies inside of the movie information. We need to use them inside of our profile. So what are we even doing by displaying them here? Well, we're going to use them only for one purpose, and that is for finding out the fact, have we favorited or watchlisted a movie before? We need to be able to know that information so that the next time we come, it needs to be saved there. To do that, we're going to use a use effect. So this use effect is going to have a callback function and a dependency array. We also have to import use effect at the top. And we're going to have two things as dependencies. The first one is going to be favorite movies. So whenever this thing changes, we want to rerun this function. And the second parameter is going to be data. The only thing we need to do here is say set is movie favorited, and then we can do it like this: favorite movies question mark dot results question mark dot find. So we're trying to find that specific movie inside of our movies. Inside of our find, we're going to get one specific movie, and the only thing we need to do is say movie question mark dot id is triple equal to data question mark dot id. This was a long line. So basically, we are taking our list of the account's favorited movies, and we're looking if the current movie that the user is looking at is inside of that list. Hopefully it makes sense. If not, don't worry, this is really an obscure thing to do. Also, I noticed in here, this should have been data question mark dot id. Great. So now we can basically duplicate this one more time. And again, the only thing we have to change is favorite movies here is going to be watchlist movies. And then the second thing is going to be set is movie watchlisted. And from the find, we're just getting back the element if it exists, but we want to get a Boolean value. So inside of here, we're going to use a double exclamation mark. What this does is if you get back an object, for example, and if you use not object, object is a truth value, so this is going to turn out to be what? False, right? But since an object is truthy and you want to get just a Boolean of that truthy, you're going to put one more exclamation mark there. So that's first going to turn it to false and then to true. Same thing if you have something like an empty string. An empty string by default is falsy. So if you just apply the exclamation mark, that's going to make it to true. And then one more is going to make it to false. Great. Make sure that you have those double exclamation marks both here and here. Now that we've done all of this crazy logic, let's save it and take a look in the browser. I reloaded the page and let's try clicking favorite. There we go. You can see the state changed, but the real question here is if I reload the page, is this going to stay the same? And yes, it actually reads the state. Let's try with watchlist. That thing unfortunately didn't change. Let's reload one more time. Okay, we most likely messed something up with watchlist. Let's see. Set is movie watchlisted, watchlist movie here, here, in here, that seems to be fine. Watchlist, add to watchlist, and then below, where is our watchlist button? It's here. So this part also seems to be fine. This should be working. Let's go ahead and save it and test it one more time. I might be missing something. If I reload the page one more time, and if I click watchlist, really nothing happens. Let's try to add some console logs. I'm going to put a console log right here above our add to watchlist. I'm going to put it in an object and I want to console log is movie watchlisted. Great. Now if I open up the console and if I click watchlist, we do get an error. There we go. So we get a 400 error, and the error is saying, there we go, 400 on this API request. The resource you requested could not be found. So let's see if we have a mistake in our URL. API, themoviedb.org 3 account, watchlist, API key seems to be fine, session ID seems to be fine. So where is our issue? Okay, I noticed the issue. Right here, we're saying favorite. This thing rather should be watchlist. That's the thing that actually changes the state of the watchlist movie. Now, if we reload the page, and click watch list, you can see that in here we get a minus sign. If we click it again, we get a plus sign. So let's go ahead and go to Venom and let's try to add it to the favorites. But you can see that it also seems to be watchlisted already. So we'll see what's about that. But now we have one more thing to do, and that is to go to My Movies and actually render out the movies that we have added to favorites. We can do that by going to our profile. That's going to be right inside of here. And finally, we have to do the same two API calls that we did in our movie information. We can basically copy them. Those are these two hooks, so we can simply call them. I'm going to copy these two calls straight into our profile. I'm going to do it at the top right here. And of course, we also have to import use get list. So let's go here. I'm going to copy this, paste it here, and the only thing we need is the use get list. Do we need anything else? We already have the user object, session ID is coming from the state, and page is 1. We don't need this dummy array right here. And it seems to me like we are already trying to make use of the movies, but now we actually have to loop over them and show them. So let's do that right here. Of course, we're not just dealing with favorite movies. We can say if not favorite movies, question mark dot results, question mark dot length, and if not watch list movies, question mark dot results, question mark dot length. Only if both of them don't exist, then we show this, but else we need to display them. So we're going to create a new component to display our movies. And that component is going to be rated cards. So these are the movies that we have already rated. Let's create that component inside of our components folder called rated cards. Our rated cards is going to be a new component, rated cards.jsx, and it's going to be an RAFCE. And inside of here, we can import just a few things. The first thing is going to be import. That's going to be typography and a box. This is going to be coming from add MUI material. We'll also have to import these styles. So we can say import use styles from /styles. And while we're here, we can also create them, styles.js. And as we usually do, import this one and paste it here. Great. So now we can continue with the imports. We also need to import a single movie component. So that's going to be import movie, and that's going to be coming from ... There we go. And finally, let's declare our classes. Const classes is equal to use styles, and we call it as a hook. Now, inside of here, the only thing we're going to have is going to be a box. Inside of that box, we're going to show a typography. That typography is going to be of a variant is equal to h5, and it's going to have gutter bottom. Then we're either going to say favorites or watch list. For now, I'm going to hard code it. And then below that, we want to render out those movies, so we can display a box. That box is going to have a display equal to flex. Flex wrap is going to be set to wrap. And then finally, it's going to have a class name equal to classes.container. And inside of here, we need to loop over the data. So inside of our profile component, we're going to call our rated cards, and we're going to pass two things. The first thing is going to be the title. The title is going to say favorite movies, and the data is going to be favorite movies. Of course, let me spell that correctly. That's going to be favorite. Now we can duplicate this, and the second time we're simply going to say watch list. And we're going to pass over the watch list movies. Of course, we have to export our rated cards right here. So let's put it right here, rated cards. And then finally, inside of our profile, we can simply import it at the top by saying import rated cards from ... So finally, inside of the rated cards, we're now getting the title and we're getting the data. The title we can render out here because that's going to change. And then the actual data, we can loop over it to show our movies. So we can say data dot results dot map. We get a single movie and an index. And for each movie, we want to show a movie component. That movie has to have a key, which is equal to movie.id. And also, we're going to pass in the movie itself and the eye so that we know to do that loading animation. I'm going to save that. And remember, we're passing that eye so that we can calculate the timeout for the grow animation. Great. So this part seems to be fine. We are rendering the rated cards for the favorite movies and also for the watchlist movies. Let's save it and see how does it look like. And would you look at that? We already have some movies here because we've been clicking some things before. Now let's try to remove all of the movies from the watch list. Jason Bourne, I'm gonna remove that and go back. Now you're gonna notice that the changes don't immediately apply. You have to reload the page for the changes to take effect. Now to fix that, we're gonna get one more thing which Redux Toolkit Query offers us, and that's something called refetch. So with each call, we also get a refetch call, and we're going to rename that to refetch favorites, and also right here, refetch watchlist or watchlisted. Great. Now we can have a use effect, and this use effect is going to be called only on the component did mount, meaning only at the start, and we can simply call these two functions like this. This is going to tell Redux Toolkit Query to call our changes so that we are always up to date with our newly added to the watchlist movies or added to the favorites. Now let's save that and check it out. Now let's try to remove all of the movies from our favorites. I'm gonna click unfavorite. That seems to be working, and I'm gonna click my movies. And as you can see, it was immediately deleted. We can do that for the Venom as well, and that worked. Right now we don't have any favorite movies. Let's remove Tomb Raider from our watchlist movies, and let's add it to the favorites just to test it out. And there we go. The movie has been added to the favorites and removed from the watch list. That means that this functionality is now done. You can keep going through different popular movies and you can add them to the watch list if you want to watch them later, or maybe they're your all-time favorites, so you can add them to the favorites, and that way you'll end up with a lot of movies that you can explore straight from your Filmpire application. There we go. You can create your own collection. This functionality is now completely done. I know that this part inside of the movie information right here has been awful. And then we had to do some weird logic to figure out if the movie has been watchlisted before. This might have been an issue on the TMDB API side, because they should have provided simpler ways for us to find out if the current user has added this movie to their favorites. But we didn't have a built-in way to do that, so we had to do everything manually. With that said, don't stress at all if this part seems weird. Or maybe if it doesn't work, that's completely fine. You can find the code for the entire repository below this lecture or where you usually look at it, and then you can compare it or even copy it. That way, you can be sure that everything works. With that said, this major piece of functionality has now been implemented. Take a look at this monster movie information file. This is a really long one. But the rest of our application is pretty lean. All of the files have only about 20-30 lines, which is great. We're keeping it really lean and readable. With that said, our next goal is going to be to implement the dark mode. So we're going to do that next. And there's one thing that I completely forgot. We're going to implement Alan AI. a voice assistant that's going to help us traverse our application. We'll be able to let him know, play us some comedy movies or something like that, and then he's going to open up all of the comedy movies. We're going to do that straight after doing the dark mode, so stay tuned for that.